Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and we are well into day 3 of the 5th Annual Global Education Conference. Some of you are exhausted, others are excited. John Mergendoller is here. John, welcome.
Thank you.
We're really having a lot of fun. Thanks to our sponsors and supporters, especially to Iron USA and the Global Campaign for Education, and all of these other fine organizations who have supported the conference and make it freely available. For those of you who are participating live, this is your chance to indicate where you are on the world map. Now, as we, for this conference, we really should be using a different projection, I think, on the map, but it serves the purpose. Click on the star icon to the left. Click on it twice, then click on the map, and then put your information in the chat. Someday we're going to turn this upside down and do one of the better projections for land mass. That would be a good thing. If you're in the United States, you're probably experiencing some cold. Those of you who aren't, if you would tell us the time and the temperature, I'd love to hear it. And keep that going in the chat. I'm going to move us ahead to introduce John. John Mergendoller is the Executive Director of the Buck Institute for Education. He channels Yoda in providing strategic leadership and fiscal management. Joining BIE in 1989 as Research Director, he was responsible for conducting research on the impact of BIE's project-based economics units. His publications span educational technology, science education, middle grades reform, and naturally project-based learning. Before joining BIE, he was a senior program director at the Far West Laboratory, which is now WestEd, a federally funded regional education laboratory. At Far West, he also established and managed the at-risk student program and the secondary improvement program. John, welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm turning the time over to you, but I'm here to help.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining me. I'm honored to be here. This is a very exciting event, and I hope that you find it useful to spend a little time with me today. I'm going to start with a story that one of my board members told me about 9 months ago. And this individual came to me and said very excitedly, he was new on the board, that my child, my son, is doing project-based learning at their school. And since the Buck Institute for Education is all about project-based learning, I was enthusiastic, and I said, that's great. So, what's his first project on? And the board member said, well, I'm not entirely sure, but he gets a different packet about the project each week. And I said, really? What's in the packets? And he said, oh, reading assignments and worksheets, and then they make some sort of presentation at the end of the week about what they've been learning. And my response was, well, I'm glad that your son has a chance to make a presentation and so forth, but that really doesn't sound very much like project-based learning to me. And that led to a board discussion and a staff discussion about, well, what exactly does it mean to use project-based learning? And that's what I'm going to talk about today, sort of where we are in our thinking about this. We've started using a catchphrase amongst us, which is Gold Standard project-based learning, trying to indicate that there are degrees of quality, that not everything called PBL is necessarily PBL. So let's see if you find this a useful way of thinking about things. Before I go much farther, I just want to show you some resources in case you don't know them. I'm not going to spend much time on them, but if you don't know our website, you will find hundreds of projects organized by grade level and Common Core standard and subject. In our project search, you'll find videos about teachers and students doing projects. You'll find links to our community where teachers talk with one another, get ideas for projects, and so forth. So I think it's probably worth spending a little time there. We have our publications, if you want to spend some money, that they're designed as if they are dummies guides. Try and be light and humorous, but get the job done, giving suggestions about how to do PBL in your classroom. We have a yearly conference in Napa, California. You can join 500 or 600 other teachers working on projects. The electricity at that project, at that conference is just great. And you can go, if you want, to our PBLU, which has downloadable projects and is an online learning community focused on project-based learning. But that's enough of the advertisements. Let's get into the content. So that conversation I had with the board sort of led me to put on a fairly skeptical look at what people are calling project-based learning. And I found more and more articles and so forth which suggested that PBL was the flavor of the month. And I didn't get a sense that it would have much staying power. So I asked myself, where did it come from? And what we're looking for is PBL done well, the gold standard, not just PBL. So I'm making my way through nearly anything that has the words project-based learning or problem-based learning in the title over the last 30 years. And I've been reading about the history of project-based learning. Now, if you had asked me 9 months ago where project-based learning came from, I would have said, well, it came from John Dewey and progressive education. And how wrong I would have been. Because project-based learning was really established in the 16th century in an art school called the Accademia di San Luca in Rome. And what happened was, at that time, architects and sculptors were considered skilled tradespeople, like a carpenter, say. But they weren't considered either artists or professionals. And that didn't sit too well with the architects. They thought they had knowledge and skills just like a lawyer or a doctor. So they wanted to increase their status. And to do that, you needed two things. You needed two things to be considered a professional. You needed a body of knowledge that was yours, and you needed a school to teach it. So they established an art school where you could go and you could pay money and learn to be an architect or a sculptor. And since this was the 16th century, the school was set up like all other schools. There was the learned architect who stood at a raised lectern and lectured about how to build a building, how to design a church. And there was some disputation and discussion among the students, but the authority was in the center of the room, and the knowledge was in the center of the room. Well, the students didn't like that very much. And they raised the question, if we're going to build churches that have roof designs like this, and if we're going to figure out how to site that church and how to make sure it still is there in 300 or 400 or 500 years, we need to do something with our hands. We need to do our own building. We need to make models. We need to try things out. We need progetti, which is a blueprint or a model. And the word project stems from progetti, and progetti was originally Italian. And they created a set of steps in which the master would give a challenge or an assignment, and then the students would work together, or sometimes alone, and respond by drawing how they would respond to the challenge, by building small-scale models, and sometimes by working as apprentices outside and actually learning how the actual architects were going about designing buildings. The tradition of training architects like that, has continued pretty much until now, or continues now. We're using CAD/CAM software maybe instead of balsa wood models, but it's still the same experience of being given a challenge, of responding to that challenge, of designing one's own ideas and carrying them out, and then subjecting it to review and critique by others. And there's lots of book learning that goes on during that. There's lots of understandings that are necessary regarding tensile strength and load bearing, how to the right angle to support various weights. But there's also a lot of doing. And this tradition, which started actually as vocational education in 16th century Rome, still undergirds the way we think about project-based learning. So let's fast forward now to the early 20th century. The first book that was explicitly titled Project, a project method in this case, was written by William Hurd Kilpatrick, who was a professor at the Teachers College at Columbia University. He is generally credited with coining project-based learning in the United States, and is certainly credited with drawing attention to it and creating it as a way of teaching, distinct from lecture, distinct from recitation, distinct from apprenticeship, but doing projects. And the thing that excited Kilpatrick about the project method was that he found it was so engaging for students. And for Kilpatrick, engagement was all. He believed that if students weren't engaged, they weren't learning. And he went around the country speaking on the project method, talking to progressive educators, doing all he could to get more traditional education methods moved outside, away from the school, and to get project-based learning into the school. Now, his mentor was John Dewey, and Dewey was teaching at Teachers College at the same time. Although many people assume that Dewey created project-based learning, he actually had some severe reservations about it. He was all for student engagement. He understood the power that brought But what he didn't like was that project-based learning was putting too much emphasis on raw experience, simply doing things for the virtue of doing them, being engaged because it was engaging. And he also didn't like the fact that the teacher was not part of the equation. He felt education was a partnership. The student, clearly important. It was for the benefit of the student. But he felt the teacher was a partner in this, in that dialogue about learning, and had things to add, and had to be considered always in tandem with the student. And he wrote some about his criticisms of project-based learning and the erroneous ideas people had about his own writing, which emphasized experience. And he felt experience was clearly at the center of education. But it was really the preparation for learning, not the learning itself. And he wrote, we do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. And this is where Dewey challenged Kilpatrick and those who were really just looking to get students engaged. And to some degree, he challenged the traditional model that I began with of creating things. And he thought creation was great, but he thought that critical step back and reflection upon what you created and what you learned and what you could apply in the future was really more important. So this leads us to where we are today. We are on version 31 of a design template for Gold Standard project-based learning. And the reason why it is version 31 is because we keep getting good ideas, sometimes our own, but probably more frequently from the critique and suggestions and thoughtful response of others. And at the end of this talk, I'm going to give you several ways that you can contribute to this dialogue and extend our own thinking. Our goal is to publish an iteration of this design later in the year, and then really this is sort of the soft launch, this talk and others that I'm making around the country, and then we'll publish something, make it available through ASCD, and ask for further review and critique. But what are we thinking? Let me talk about that. If you've seen our 7 essentials of project-based learning, this will seem familiar to you. And as with that diagram, we put the student at the center. We put the student's learning or the outcomes of what the project is all about. And to our mind, there are 2 things that are always part of significant gold standard project-based learning. Learning some significant content, that is, things that are being learned that you would feel bad as a teacher if a student left your class not knowing them, or your grade level, or your school. And sometimes that content is aligned to district standards or Common Core standards. And sometimes it may be more specialized content that is of significance to you as an instructional decision maker. But it is something worth spending time on. It's something worth learning. And paired with that is the key college and career competencies that students need to be successful in work, in life, in the future. And many people have defined these in different ways. We have the partnership with 21st century skills. We have a set of the 4 C's. We have college and career readiness. People come at them in different ways, but they're the skills and competencies that allow students to succeed and thrive. We're very partial to the 4 C's: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. But this is something that people differ on, although they certainly share the overall idea that in today's world, content knowledge is not enough. So we would put these at the heart of any definition or understanding of project-based learning. Then we have 6 key project design features. And these are more or less sequential. I hesitate a little bit to say that because often when you're designing a project, you may start with a sequential model in mind, but then it sort of moves around on you. And as you change one thing, then you need to go back and you change another. And you have to sort of push it all into shape so it totally makes sense. But that said, in our way of thinking, a project begins with a challenging problem or question. It's sort of hard to do a project if challenge is not involved. It's not a project then, it's more an exercise. And a project should require kids to go out and do some research and learn something and discover something and find out something new. Now maybe this is done by talking with experts in the community. It may not be done on the web or with a textbook or something like that. But there is a challenge. That's what starts the project. That's what motivates. And one way that challenge can be even more motivating is by making it an authentic one. Now, what in the world does authenticity mean? We think that there are at least 4, maybe 5 ways that you can make a project authentic. And the general idea is probably the more authentic, the better, but that may not always be the case given the nature of some projects. But the first way you make a project authentic is by engaging students in the same tasks that people in the world outside them are doing, so that what they're doing themselves matches what people do in the real world outside school. A second way is to apply the same evaluation criteria to what they're doing that's being applied in the real world. If the project is to design a field guide to a local park or to a lake or to the Pacific Ocean, then that should be subjected to the same standards of readability and clarity and quality of illustration that you would find in a commercial field guide. The third way is to engage people from the outside world in the project so that the people involved, so that the students are involved with people who actually do this. They can learn the ways of thinking and the vocabulary and the concerns and questions that engineers or gardeners or biologists themselves face. And a fourth way is to have a topic that is real to the student, that is authentic to them, because it involves their community, their school, their town, their family, or their own development as a person, their own questions and yearnings and challenges and confusions. So, authenticity, second key project design feature. We argue that if students can't exhibit and express voice and choice in a project, it's not a real project. If a project is simply carrying out someone else's instructions, again, it's an exercise, not a project. Similarly important is going through critique and revision. I mentioned that we have 30-plus versions of this diagram, and we think they get better. We hope they do. They make more sense to us. But it's very rare, if not an absolute fluke, that you get something right the first time, especially if you're really addressing a challenge, something that's not trivial. And the way that it gets better and better is by getting critique from others and revising it with others or by yourself. And you won't get that critique and revision unless there's a public product, and the whole learning process has a certain publicness to it. So a public product is a key aspect of this. Finally, reflection. We took that right from Dewey, that it's not just doing the project, it's not just creating the field guide, it's reflecting on it, and that's at the heart of the learning. Okay, moving to the next set. Also from Dewey, we wanted to bring in the teacher. But that raised the question of what do teachers do in project-based learning that is specific to making students successful in their project work. And we think there are 6 key features in teachers' instruction that are very important. First of all, they design the project. Now, there are variations. Obviously, students can design projects, and they often do. But teachers still have the responsibility in that case for approving it and accepting the design. So the ultimate design responsibility rests with the adult, we believe. They are the expert in the room, or the person who is relying on external expertise and has the judgment to decide whether this project is basically worth doing. And they align the project with key learning outcomes that they're looking for, the skills as well as the knowledge. They manage it in the sense of making resources available. Obviously, students can participate in this step just as they can participate in other steps. But at the end of the day, it is the teacher who is managing what happens in the classroom, even if they are giving authority to the students to take a major role in this. Teachers are responsible for scaffolding, to making sure that students are successful. That doesn't mean that they're telling people what to do, but they are giving the resources to support them or suggesting ways that students might learn what's needed to accomplish a certain step. They're constantly assessing what's going on, not only in a terminal summative way, although grades are a fact of classroom life, but more importantly, in a formative way. If you've looked at any of John Hattie's work about the power of feedback and formative assessment, then you know how important getting good feedback is. And you can't get good feedback unless someone has really assessed what you're doing. I would recommend highly Grant Wiggins' latest blogs about formative assessment, its importance, and the role it plays, not only just in understanding by design, but just in classroom learning. Finally, they're a coach. They inspire, they help people set goals, they encourage them, and they show them ways to address problems that need to be addressed or improved. So This is our three-part diagram of what we think gold standard project-based learning is. The packet that I began talking about would not fit this very well. There's very little authenticity, very little student voice and choice. Sounds like there was a public product that was involved, but no evidence of critique and revision, and no evidence of reflection. And I don't know if it was a challenging problem or question or not. So, very much like to hear your thoughts about this description of project-based learning in the chat window.
John, you can see people writing. It's the little thought or word bubble to the right of their name. And then as soon as they post, it'll show up on the chat.
Okay, great. Okay, I see Jill. He's writing. Yeah, Sharkey Support talks about, Sharkey, someone at least is talking about special learning needs. That's something that teachers really talk to us about. With all this focus on projects, often there's not enough focus on the scaffolding and coaching that go along with it. And especially when you've got a heterogeneous classroom of students with different learning needs, that needs to be something called out, that the teacher knows that they are going to be involved helping individuals as well as just managing the project. Yep, there's definitely a bias toward doing things, toward actively learning. Good question. Jill asks about learning outcomes, global versus global classrooms. I don't know. I have not come across any research that either makes that comparison or really that provides outcome data for multiple classrooms in a global setting. So I'm afraid I don't know anything about that. Well, any wonders about this? Things that don't make sense?
That's the magic of iterating 30 times.
Okay, some good questions. Or at least good points. Moss Pike, how do you do it within a traditional school schedule? Very difficultly. If you have 45 minutes to spend on project-based learning and then have to run out to the next class, it compromises the projects you can do. It compromises the freedom that you can give your students. It compromises the amount of time you can give to presentations. So it's very hard. You need more time than a traditional school schedule allows to do it easily. that said, we see marvelous teachers who overcome great odds and do it in traditional school schedules. Yeah, can you block with another teacher? Can you somehow trade? Can you come together? Texas is a hotbed, Jill, as you know, of PBL. We're working in the Round Rock School District and Granbury Independent School District and quite a few places. They're very receptive to PBL, which is interesting in many ways. One of which is, of course, it's not a Common Core state, and so many people that are adopting the Common Core are looking to project-based learning as a way to accomplish the higher order outcomes that that Common Core requests. Austin, well, Round Rock's pretty close, and I believe also there's also Manor. Yeah, right. Manor New Tech. Aha, great on the biology teacher. Okay, good points. Okay.
Did you see Laney's question about homeschooling?
No, I skipped right over it.
She said, it's interesting for me to hear this description. I'm most familiar with PBL from the homeschooling perspective where the responsibility is on the learner.
Well, the way we think about it, people think about this differently, is that learning is a sort of a shared responsibility between the teacher and the learner. The teacher may not be in the learner's face, but at the same time, they are creating conditions. They are making sure that certain experiences happen to maximize the possibility that the learner learns. And just speaking only for myself, I can no longer see learning without thinking about how the environment is impacting that learning, and in most situations, the teacher is part of that environment. So, good. Looks like a good resource for project-based homeschooling. Glad to know about it. I wonder if Sharkey Support could say a little more about how he or she scaffolded, because this is always the difficult problem.
Sharkey, if you'd like, you can take the microphone. If you don't have a microphone handy, you can let us know in the chat. To turn your microphone on, you just click on the talk button at the top left. Up in a library.
Okay. And yes, I'd like to shout out to the Autodesk Foundation. I certainly did do some great work in the 90s. We're trying to channel that in the resources that are available on our website. Well, it looks like the comments are sort of falling off, so maybe we've reached a stopping point. I want to encourage you, though, to send me your questions, your critique, your comments. You can be old-fashioned and send me an email. I will read it and I will respond. You can tweet me. You can, if you're interested in this conversation, check out the hashtag Gold Standard PBL. And of course, there's more at www.bie.org, including a blog that I'm updating about our understanding of what gold standard project-based learning might look like. We're on, as I said, in the iteration of the 30s, and that will continue. The hard launch will be in June at PBL World, which is the conference I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, and you can find out more information at pblworld.org. So any more questions that I could address?
I see some typing. They're typing thank yous.
I'd just like to say you guys are very gracious. I'm touched and appreciative. There was a question here. As a trainer of 21st century learning, how can I encourage teachers to use PBL? Well, I think that I'll tell you our approach. We're working with about 20 districts now. And the goal of each of these is to make PBL a legitimate and expected part of the way teachers teach. And one thing that we don't do is encourage districts to mandate this. Our general experience is that in almost any district or school, there are a couple of teachers who are either know what PBL is and basically just want to get better at it, or who are intrigued by the idea. And we try and start with people who want to do this. We don't try and build the fire under them. We try and fan the flames that are already there. And we support them with professional development and resources and sample projects. We encourage them to join the PBL Google Plus community or the Edmodo PBL community, and find some fellow travelers who have the same interests and hopefully the same grade level or subject that they have, and start talking with them and try and build an example of success that is local and is observable. For example, if teachers are doing a project and there is a presentation at the end, bring in some other teachers, maybe from other schools. Bring in the parents, bring in the world, try and show what's going on. But don't expect that things are going to change overnight. It seems to be the way things change in districts is that people become excited about an idea, then more and more people become excited, and before you know it, everybody is doing it. So, to go back to your question, look for 2 or 3 teachers, or a handful, that are ripe for doing PBL, and then do everything you can to support them and make it easy for them to do it and to be successful in doing it. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful. Please send me your critique.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody. You probably know how this works, but we'll turn the recording off. It will go up in a few minutes once the room is cleared, so everybody has to actually leave the room. Take care. Bye.
Steve, thank you very much.